The Rams are cooking. They've made 3 signings. We're going to break it all down. We have one that was just announced a few minutes ago. Darius Williams is back in L.A. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button. A couple subscribers away from 12,000, so do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Also, what is your reaction to all the Rams signings? I want all your takes on the signings they have made or are going to make. Let us know down below. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 Sports, Dodgers Nation, SI. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He just finished his 8th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, we are breaking down the Rams signings. We have a breaking news signing we're going to get into just a few minutes ago. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Travis, a lot to cover on this show, so let's get right into it. A couple minutes ago, Rappaport tweet out, former Jaguars cornerback Darius Williams is finalizing a deal to play for the Rams. Sources say the place where he won a Super Bowl is expected to be a 3-year deal. So Darius Williams is back. Of course, he spent 4 seasons with the Rams, 2 as a full-time starter. He was on the 2021 Super Bowl 56 winning team. Signed a really nice deal with the Jaguars, and then he was cut. And I think I love this pickup. Darius Williams can play outside. He's a little undersized, right? 5'9", 187, but he is an outside corner. He played well in that role. And you have Lake, you have Kobe Turner, you have Trey Tomlinson that can play the slot. I think now it's you got Darius Williams in the fold. Now you got to go out there and get an outside corner that's a little over 6 feet, maybe 6 to 6'2". We'll talk about that.
Yeah, look, I think they've got themselves exactly what they needed. They have NFL competency at an incredibly important position. Is it Jalen Ramsey? No. Is it better than what they have? Absolutely it is, right? And this is where they are at this position, that the guys that they've drafted have either not delivered what they wanted or maybe not delivered quite as much as they wanted, that this wasn't something that they were able, to fix during the draft. This is something that they needed to address during free agency. This is somebody that they're familiar with. They know his work ethic. They know the way that he goes about his business, and they're obviously very comfortable bringing him back in. Jacksonville didn't cut him because he wasn't good. They cut him to save some money, right? That was more of a move to save themselves about $10 million in cap space than it was anything else. I agree with you. He is a little undersized. This is not one of those big corners that we like to see as much as we do. And I'll mention Jalen Ramsey's name again right there. Of course, Jalen Ramsey, 6'3" or so, and able to be an incredibly physically dominating player at the position. But Darius Williams is a good player. Darius Williams will immediately be the best corner on that team starting now, and that's something that they need. They got better at a position of need. It didn't break the bank to go do it. It's somebody that they know and they trust, and I like it.
I absolutely I love this signing because, you're talking about someone who is a top 5 to 10 cornerback, no matter how you slice it. Last season, he was tied for the 5th best coverage corner in the NFL per PFF. And you're talking about him in the same conversation as guys like Deron Bland, Charvarius Ward, Sauce Gardner, and Jalen Johnson. Those were the only corners that in coverage were ranked higher than him per PFF. And you get someone, like you said, he knows the Rams system. He knows the Rams culture. He knows what they're about here in Los Angeles and what they're going after. He's won a Super Bowl with this team, and he knows that this team is going all in to win another Super Bowl. Now, as far as his size, I mean, he's someone who is unique in the sense that, yeah, he is 5'9", but he has shown time and time again the ability to get it done on the outside. So there's no doubts about that. As far as where the Rams go from here, you have to get a cornerback that is above 6 feet. They don't have a cornerback on the roster over 6'1" now with Ahkello Witherspoon, a free agent. Now, I think you could consider bringing back Ahkello Witherspoon. He's going to test those free agent waters, right? They didn't get a deal done with him. Or now you really focus in on that corner in the draft. A guy like Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. You got Terrion Arnold, who's at 6 foot out of Alabama. Would probably have to trade up to get him. But yeah, this is a signing that the Rams really, this is a great signing. I really love this signing. I'm telling you, Darius Williams back in LA, someone who can just go in day one. You know what you're getting. Darius Williams back with the Rams. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. And I like something that you mentioned, Doug, because I think it's super important is this is somebody that they're familiar with. This is somebody that's familiar with them. I always like it when you get a player and a team that come back together a second time. I think it means they both had a positive experience the first time around. There's a level of trust that's built in there. I know that we get accused of talking a little Dodger baseball on Locked On Rams. It's a little bit like a Kike Hernandez coming back to the team. You kind of know exactly what you're going to get, that this isn't necessarily, an all-star or an all-pro signing, but it's somebody that what they're going to bring to the table. They know what their expectations of the player are. And I think that that's an opportunity for both sides to do really well. Think John Johnson, what the Rams did last year with him. Is it going to be the difference between a Super Bowl run and not? Probably not, but familiar faces in familiar places is something I always like.
100%. I think the big question now is, what does this mean for their cornerback room? Is he a replacement for Ahkello Witherspoon, or is he someone that you bring in the hopes of also bringing back Ahkello Witherspoon? Do you draft another corner? Because you need to find another cornerback. We know that, but this is a big, big step in the right direction because this was a major need that they had to address. And yeah, like you said, he wasn't cut by the Jaguars because he was a bad player. They loved him in Jacksonville. He had a lot of success there. Like I said, top 5 to 10 coverage corner in the league. But also, I think it's worth mentioning, too, that because he was cut by the Jags, it's not going to affect their future comp pick for this year. So not like we're looking likely to get any after 2 good signings, but still, I think that's something you factor in because we know this organization, they're going to consider everything on the margins. But really, all in all, the big takeaway here, Rams are cooking, man. Rams are cooking. Rams are active. Rams are aggressive. And if you look at the cap space they had after their last signing, I mean, you're talking about a team that was sitting around $13 million in effective cap space after yesterday's signing. Well, I think it's pretty clear at this point you're probably going to move off of Joe Noteboom, save $5 million unless you can get a deal done at a favorable deal, or you could restructure Matthew Stafford's contract, which I think is looking more likely right now, which gets you around $19 million. This team has indicated that they're, one, willing to bring back their own guys like Kevin Dotson, right? Guys like Robinson. And then also saying that, hey, we're also willing to, for the first time in the Sean McVay era, to go external during the non-tampering period. And I think that shows that they're kind of zigging a little bit from some of their norms.
Everything about this says to me that they're getting ready to make another run, that they think they're close, right? And I think there's something that Rams fans can take a lot of comfort in and be very excited about, is that when they think they're close, they usually are, right? They haven't been wrong too often when it's like, you know what? It's time to bet big on these things. When they start throwing chips in, means they have pretty good cards. And I think that that's what they think they have right now, that they're bringing back a guy like Darius Williams, that they're plugging some holes on that offensive line. I know we're going to talk about that in just a little bit with Jonah Jackson, that they realize that they need to get better at tight end, that they're doing the things that they need to do to make sure that Matthew Stafford is set up, that they're doing the things they need to do to maybe not become the 85 Bears on defense, but get a little better in the places that they need to do. This is not developmental. This is, we're close. Let's try to fill some of these holes. And I think Williams does that.
Absolutely. And also give credit to this Rams organization. These guys want to return, whether it be guys that were here a couple years ago, they went elsewhere, and now they're back, like Darius Williams, or guys like Kevin Dotson, who say, you know what, I love what we see here. So give credit to this organization, the culture that they've built. But coming up in our next segment, we have more signings to break down. A guard that was signed yesterday, a tight end. We're going to break it all down next here on Locked On Rams.
Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, right? So whether you're betting big on a big upset, right? Those 5-12 upsets are always happening, right? The 12 seem to always win one of those games. Or maybe you're going all chalk. You love the number one seeds. It's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook, because right now, if you're a new customer to FanDuel, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even bet on who you think is going to win it all. You've got all the action. We're just about to get started, just a couple of weeks away. So make sure that you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, and bet on college hoops until they cut down the net. It's the most exciting time of the year, and you can make it even better with FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon.
And we are off running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to our every listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. We appreciate you, and you can enjoy every single episode this offseason, and you can be a member of that Everyday Listeners Club too. Just watch and listen to every single episode. Membership is free, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. Now, Travis, more signings to get into. This one, guard Jonah Jackson. They signed Jonah Jackson on a 3-year, $51 million deal. Jackson was with the Lions, and he played with Matthew Stafford a few years back, so there's some familiarity there. And for me, my biggest takeaway is that this Rams team, they're going all in for Matthew Stafford to try to maximize him and try to optimize everything he has left in his career. And two, they're going all in on the run game. These are people movers now, right? You have Kevin Dotson. You have Steve Avila, who's going to most likely move to center. Then now you have Jackson. They are making a concerted effort to pound the rock, and I love this signing of Jonah Jackson.
I do too. I think this is going to be one of those things that we're talking about down the road that's going to be very, very exciting. That, again, you're talking about interior offensive linemen, but think about where they've spent some of their most valuable assets over the last couple of seasons. Their first pick in the draft last year, in the second round, but the first time they got to pick a player, they took a guy that's a guard center in Steve Avila, a guy that played every single snap last year, a guy that brought a certain level of nasty. They went out and got Kevin Dotson. We've talked a lot about how important he was. They gave him a bag to make sure that he stays there as well at that other guard position. And then they go out and they get Jonah Jackson from the Lions, who's another interior lineman. Like you said, D-Mac, this is how they are building this offensive line from the inside out, right? Rob Havenstein on the right side, Lark Jackson, maybe they'll come to a deal with him. Maybe they go shopping, maybe they draft. We'll see what it looks like at left tackle. But you're right. And think about where they got him from, not just because he's familiar with Matthew Stafford in Detroit, but Detroit had one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL. The reason that Jared Goff was able to do what he does, the reason that the Lions were a really good team last year is because the offensive line was one of the best in the whole league. To be able to take one of those guys and drop him into your line, it's a huge advantage. And again, I think this is another example of them going pretty big on a position that isn't super sexy, right? This isn't a wide receiver. This isn't a quarterback. This isn't even an edge guy, but just an incredibly important fundamental piece to make sure that number 9 has everything that he needs.
For sure. And I see some people out there saying, oh, this might be a little bit of overpay at $17 million a season. It's not necessarily an egregious overpay. I think people have to remember that, one, the cap did go up significantly, and two, these guards are getting paid, man. These guards are getting bags. I mean, Robert Hunt for the Panthers, he got $100 million, $63 million guaranteed. So that's the price of doing business right now. Yep. If you want a guard in the upper echelon, that's just how it is. I mean, last season he did deal with some injuries that impacted him, but most importantly, he's someone that, like we point out, he's effective against the run. Also, he can help keep Matthew Stafford upright. According to PFF, he had a run blocking grade of 70.3 in 22, 76.4 in 2021. He's never finished with a run blocking grade lower than 58.2, so he can help from that standpoint. He's better as a run blocker than he is as a pass protector. And all I have to say about that is, one, you always have to take PFF grades with a grain of salt. And two, look what we saw Kevin Dotson last season. He came in and his specialty was supposed to be that he was better at as a pass protector, then a run blocker, and then he flipped the script with the Rams. So, look, you just want a quality offensive lineman. I think that's exactly what he brings. And your friend, Mr. Steve Avila, I'm excited to see what this does for him, having him at the center spot. That's his natural position.
Yeah, it's a good move for Avila for sure. And while, yes, he's a better run blocker than a pass blocker, at least according to the numbers that you're talking about, D-Mac, think about what we're talking. Kyren Williams was having a great season last year. It looks like he's going to be set up to have another opportunity to have another great year this year. And what happens if Kyren Williams is really good? Matthew Stafford gets better, right? That if you give him a running game, if you make the defense have to defend both the passing and the running game, everything gets easier for Matthew Stafford. Again, I know that I am quarterback centric. I am guilty of being the guy that looks at the quarterback over and over and over again, because that's what matters in this league. Quarterback and head coach. Quarterback gets set up by the running game. The running games get set up by the offensive line. The offensive line protects the quarterback. It's all about Stafford. This is another move to help Stafford by helping Kyren Williams. It all comes back to the quarterback, and nobody understands that more than Sean McVay. And that's what he's building all over again.
Yeah, there's a lot of people smiling after this signing. Matthew Stafford's probably got a smile from ear to ear. Kyle Williams is smiling right now. Rams fans that realize that, okay, this is a sensible signing that's going to help them. And you look at Stafford, look at how's he going to get pressure up the middle now, right? I mean, Avila at TCU in his 2 years as a starting center, he had 4 sacks as a starting center. Right? He gave up 2 other hits to the QB. That's meant 2 hits. So you have Avila as your girthy big center right there. I think he's going to be a multi-time Pro Bowl center. And then he's flanked by Jackson and Dotson. I mean, I feel really good about that interior lineman. And I think that this pretty much points to the fact that Shelton most likely is going to be gone. I do think you're going to bring back Alaric Jackson as a depth piece at the very least. I think give him a second round tender. He's for sure going to be back with the Rams. But yeah, I like this signing. I think that, look, this is not some elite player. I don't think that's the case. But when you look at the premium at that, you have to go out and get a guy like this with Matthew Stafford. All these guys, their contracts lining up with Stafford in his time with the Rams too.
It's not sexy, but it's incredibly important. And let's go back a couple of years ago that when they came off of their Super Bowl win, what was the thing that made the whole thing go sideways? The offensive line was bad. And it was bad for a variety of different reasons. The number one was because they just were hurt, right? They had guys that weren't NFL quality, that weren't NFL caliber, and they've fixed that. That now their offensive line not only, and last year was kind of, hey, this isn't so bad. This works out pretty well. And it was more of a sigh of relief. And now coming into this season, I think you can look at that offensive line as a strength of this team. That this is probably something that you look at and say to yourself, hey, look, we've got a good offensive line. So even if the other things aren't exactly perfect the way that you would hope that they would be, they're going to allow you to be less than perfect and still be very, very good, because they're going to give you that extra time. They're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to move the ball inside the 10-yard line because they're big and physical. And here's another thing we haven't really talked about too much. This helps them against San Francisco in particular, who kind of has bullied them for the last several seasons as well. So I think there's a ton of upside. It's not fun. This isn't something that you're calling your buddies about and go, oh, look at who we got. It's interior linemen, but makes a football team win.
Absolutely. I definitely think there's something to be said about that too, as far as trying to construct a roster that gives them the best chance to overcome the San Francisco 49ers in the regular season and in the playoffs, because they know that they still have a couple win now years in them, and that's going to be a big competition with that too. But yeah, you can never have enough quality offensive linemen. That's exactly what he is. Has been banged up for a couple of seasons, but when he's out there, he's nothing but quality, brings that stability. To me, Pro Bowl caliber offensive lineman, you're looking at anywhere from $17 to $20 million anyway. So love this sign. I think the what's next for me, my brain's always like, what's next? Is it you draft a left tackle? Because there's really more quality right tackles and left tackles in the draft. Do you try to go after a Tyron Smith? Does Tyron Smith want to sign a 1-year deal to try to get that stock back up and try to sign himself a better deal? I mean, do you look elsewhere for that? I mean, you have 2 Jacksons. If you sign 3 more Jacksons, you could be the Jackson 5 on the offensive line. What's next for me is always kind of on my mind. But you mentioned the San Francisco 49ers. There's a player they signed yesterday that I think also addresses a need to beat teams like the Niners, and we're going to talk about him next here on Locked On Rams.
Locked on Rams is sponsored by BetterHelp. So let me ask you a question. If you had a little more time in every day, let's say you had an extra hour a day, what would you do? What's the first thing you'd do if you had a little bit more time in your hand? Well, therapy, they can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it, right? So you can just say, yeah, this is what makes me me. This is what makes me happier. This is what makes me feel better about me, right? So if you're thinking about starting therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? It is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's designed to be flexible and designed to be suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. And of course, if you don't click with that therapist, not a big deal. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today, and you'll get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Travis, another signing to get into, this time tight end Colby Parkinson. The Rams, they bring him in on a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. We talked about the tight end position a couple times this offseason and how, in-house, you had some options with Davis Allen. You have Hunter Long, Tyler Higbee. He suffered a torn ACL and MCL in the Rams playoff game and their loss to the Lions. So they went out there and said, we're going to address this position for now and probably bring us a guy who later we think you may have some double tight end sets and trying to mix things up with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because for the first time in a long time, the Rams are going to come into a season and basically have an open competition for tight end to start the year. That Tyler Higbee's been holding that spot down really since his rookie year. Like this has been his spot. He's not going to be ready to go. And like you mentioned, with 2 ligament injuries in his knee, this could be, a long recovery. This could be something that maybe he never fully recovers from and becomes the player that he was previously. So is Long up for the job? Is Allen up for the job? And if not, let's have another NFL capable player in somebody like Parkinson who can step in and do the job as well. And if you get more than one, it opens up a whole new opportunity for the Rams. Like you said, they're so heavily reliant in that 11 personnel, right? That's just what they do. 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, that maybe this allows them to get a little more creative. Maybe it allows them to do some things that Sean McVay hasn't been able to do. I know I've heard him talk before that the tight end is a very important part of what they do offensively. We've seen Tyler Higbee had some big days at various points in his Rams career. If there's a way to kind of unlock that position with a new guy, that's exciting. And maybe Parkinson's that guy.
I agree with you. I think that you shouldn't look at his past production and try to say, what does that indicate for what he's going to do with the Rams? Because one, he was underutilized in Seattle, but that changed when they went to Geno Smith. You saw more 12 and 13 personnel. Also, just look at the tight ends they had up in Seattle. You had Walt Disley, Greg Olsen, Jacob Hollister. You had old friend Gerald Everett. You had Noah Fant. So he was kind of hidden behind those guys. But still, what did he do at a top 10 level? He was a top 10 blocking tight end, according to PFF last year. And then also look at that size. When I mentioned the last segment, what can he do to help you beat the San Francisco 49ers in playoff teams? He's 6'7". What do we see in the loss of the Lions? 0 for 3 in the red zone. You get that red zone threat that you need, and you don't want to see these drives end in field goal kicks. You want to punch in the end zone. I think he's someone that's a potential to do that.
And none of the guys that you're talking about played for Sean McVay, right? That Sean McVay always has something in his bag. That Sean McVay, look, Pete Carroll is a great head coach. Pete Carroll's more of a defensive-oriented guy. Pete Carroll kind of leads with that side of the ball. That's where he made his bones in the league, and that's fine. The Seahawks, when they were at their best, were never terribly dynamic offensively. They were good, but they would lead with their defense. Give it an offensive-oriented head coach, which McVay clearly is, more weapons to play with, and he's going to find a way to use them. So I'm very excited to see him there. So far, of all the guys that they've brought in, I really have not seen one that made me kind of go, I don't quite see it. That this is Parkinson again is another one that's like, yeah, if he's the best version of himself and McVay can get that out of him, this is good news for the Rams.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to have that feeling about some of these signings because there's a lack of familiarity and you don't see the production. I mean, if you look at his career, 57 catches, 4 touchdowns, but as you mentioned, hasn't played under Sean McVay, hasn't gotten the opportunity to be that guy. If you look at his AAV at $7.5 million, Higbee's $8.5 million, look, you got to realize, like we said in the first segment, the cap has gone up, right? It's just the price of doing business. What $7.5 million is basically the new $5.5 million, right? That's kind of how you have to look at this right here. And also, he's a hometown guy, right? He went to Oaks Christian High School. Travis, of course, knows every mascot of every Southern California high school. That's the easy one, right?
Oaks Christian, is they the Lions or the
there
Lancers?
You go. See, this guy's encyclopedic knowledge of high school. I just know middle schools. For me, I'm more of a middle school, but high school is your specialty. But yeah, I like this signing. I think the Rams also, the theme in here is, look, Higbee, maybe he'll be good to go. We're not going to wait around and put our hopes with that, right? We're going to get a guy that we think this year can help us win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, look, I hope that Tyler Higbee's 100% and ready to go, but I'm not terribly optimistic. That injury looked pretty gnarly. And here's the other thing. He was not crazy impactful the last couple of seasons for the Rams. A lot of injuries along the way. They gave him the new deal, and good for him. But that there are new guys, new faces at that position. We saw Davis Allen start to become more and more of a regular participant towards the end of the season. I think that you're going to see some different Rams players at the tight end position be useful in the offensive game plan the way that Higbee had been previously, but maybe had not been the last couple of years.
Stanford guy, big target. You can't coach 6'7", 251, top 10 blocker, underutilized receiver. I like all these signings. I know I kind of sound like a homer today, but I really do like all these signings. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.